Oedipus complex is generally said to be the central organizing myth or even central organizing principle of psychoanalysis. To be more precise, Freudian psychoanalysis. Though for some it may sound tautological because psychoanalysis is basically Freudian, but still, with the advancement in time, Freud may need to be refamiliarized with the younger generation. So I'm specifically calling it Freudian psychoanalysis. Anyway, the basis of this principle or myth in one sentence is this, that uh, children's psychology is by and large affected, constituted, or modified. In a way, constituted is the best word. Children's psychology is primarily constituted by their relations with their parents, actually. And for Freud, this relation has an overtly or covertly sexual undertone. The myth that he bases his observation and the term on is the story of King Oedipus, on which even Sophocles wrote a play called Oedipus Rex. But actually, some are mistaken in believing that Sophocles wrote the thing, but actually, it is not that. The myth pre exists Sophocles' writing. Anyway, the story in brief is like this. King Laius of Thebes has come to know from an oracle, that is, the places which prophesy future, that his son will kill him. To avoid this, he binds his son's feet, from which the name Oedipus comes actually. Oedipus means soul and feet, and then asks his wife Jocasta to kill the child. However, naturally, as a mother, she cannot kill, and then she gives the child to a servant and asks him to do the murder. But even the servant fails to do that and leaves the child in a field. Till this, it is quite familiar to even some Indian folk tales. There are similar motives. Anyway, later a shepherd discovers him and then he passes the child to another shepherd from Corinth, and who takes the child back to Corinth, where the child grows up and he is raised in the court of King Polybus. However, when he becomes an adult, the child Oedipus also goes to an oracle, and there he learns that he will marry his mother and kill his father. And he has this tremendous anxiety, and then out of worry he leaves Corinth, thinking that his foster parents are actually his parents and he will kill one and marry other. And by chance, by fate, while leaving Corinth, he meets his actual biological father, that is Laius, on the road to Thebes. Then there is an argument, destined by fate, of course, and Oedipus finally kills his father unknowingly. Then he goes to Thebes. After reaching Thebes, he solves the riddle by asked by Sphinx, and then the Sphinx had also kept the city cursed. After he answers the riddle, which is a very interesting riddle actually by Sphinx, it refers to the identity of man. Anyway, after he solves this, the city is free of curse, and then he duly marries the wife of the just widowed king, without knowing that it is his original biological mother. Till this, everything is fine, and then they immediately do not know about this, neither the mother nor the son. But at a later date, when they come to know it, there is a terrible reaction and shock. The queen Jocasta hangs herself, and Oedipus blinds himself and then exiles himself. This is the disastrous end, actually. To a great extent, some psychoanalysts or psychological critics, we can say psychoanalytical critics, observe this pattern in Hamlet also. Hamlet's feelings for his mother, etc., etc., and then jealousy against the king, though not father but uncle. You have to remember that in Freud, things need not always be biological. They may be figures also. So father figure against father, or even mother figure as against mother. Freud thinks that this myth is so universal that it resonates in every heart, because we also know from cultural studies and anthropologies that one of the basic structures that human society is built on is incest taboo. Sex between close relations, especially between mother and son, are strictly prohibited, but this is not the case in the animal world, which implies that this is not natural. In it is true only of the human world, but then again in the human world it is mostly the case, so far as we know till date, that this relation is prohibited across cultures throughout the world. So though this taboo, incest taboo, is not natural, at the same time it is so universal that it has become almost natural. And the myth of Oedipus, or the play Oedipus Rex, strikes a chord in every heart, because this is the unconscious part of everyone's psyche, the prohibited relationship with mother. By the way, Oedipus complex refers both mother's desire for son and son's desire for mother, which takes various turns when it cannot take obviously sexual turn. But please do not think that I am saying all this. I am just reproducing what Freud meant. And the mother's desire, just as the son's desire for the mother has later been shown by Shakespeare through Hamlet, later means after Oedipus Rex. Similarly, D.H. Lawrence, in his very celebrated novel Sons and Lovers, also showed how a frustrated mother directs her amorous attention unknowingly to the sons. So, this is the case. In fact, Freud had written in a letter to a friend that the Oedipus story continues to be so affecting about 2500 years after it was written, because its thematic concerns are universal. He actually had introduced this in his Interpretation of Dreams, originally published in 1900 and translated in English in 1913. And to reiterate, this desire for the mother, or generally to generalize further, the Freudian observation is that the child generally has desire for the opposite sex, and then hatred for the same sex parent. So the complementary part of Oedipus complex is Electra complex actually. However, so this love and hate relation with the parents creates the basic psyche of the child, and there are stages to which the child outgrows this also. But if it cannot, then there are a lot of problems, and then it becomes a patient of neurosis later in life. There are many other stages. Oedipal is not the only stage, but since we are discussing Oedipus complex here, this is more or less the central stage in Freudian psychoanalysis. So the child's or son's desire for the mother and hatred for the father, to be specific, and to generalize, the child's desire for the parent of the opposite sex and hatred for the parent of the same sex, constitutes the child's psychology. And if it cannot outgrow it, there will be tremendous problems in life. And in fact, Freud willy-nilly or more or less relates all later traumas, psychological sufferings, and problems, neurological problems, to this, more or less. And then what we can also say is that there was tremendous objection to this kind of reading of Oedipus myth as a repressed desire, because in the myth itself or in the play it is an act of destiny. Freud analyzed in his own way to uh, fit it into a scheme of the child's desire for the mother and vice versa, to show that it is a universal psychological method. But there was tremendous repercussion from people. Freud, to the contrary, I mean, he showed that the very fact that people are reacting to this so violently and so vehemently shows that what he has argued is true. It is the most unacceptable part of human psyche which lies repressed. And though I can tell you many things that Freud said or did have been disproved by later psychoanalysts and psychologists, but about Oedipus complex, many experiments and others had been held later, and it is found that Freud more or less was right. If you want to, you can Google and see. Generally, for example, boys tend to choose unconsciously women who somehow represent their mother's thing, mother's image. And the same with uh, you know boys, I mean, rather women, they generally choose the father type. Sometimes it may be the opposite actually. They may choose what the father or mother is not like, but then also the basic principles remain. It's a love hate thing. But another thing must be said in addition: this is more or less applicable to heterosexual marriage and choice, not so much about homosexuality, but that too is incorporated in Freud's scheme of things. And according to Freud and Freudian psychoanalysts, homosexuality, especially male homosexuality, is a result of the child's, or say the case or the patient's or the person's inability to sexually connect to women because they represent the mother. I'm telling you in a very, very general term. There are many specificities. So, this kind of things have been rejected by queer theorists and even feminists. And in fact, feminists have reacted to Freud violently, primarily because he always takes the male child as the organizing principle, according to feminists. Again, and penis envy and other things is said, which actually puts women in a on a lower pedestal. That kind of thing is there. And then two postmodern critics, Deleuze and Guattari, has written a book called Anti-Oedipus, which is a vehement attack again on Freud's Oedipus complex. But as I already said, Freud has possibly made his point when he said that the vehement reactions or violent reactions to his theory itself shows that it is there. Oedipus complex is there. So it was a complex thing. It is a complex thing, and I tried to represent it in my own way because it is very essential for students of English literature, especially in understanding Hamlet, which is more or less there in 80% of the universities of India, maybe 100% either in BA honors or in MA, and also Sons and Lovers, which would there be in the syllabi of 50% if not more universities of India. So but then, since this is a very intricate and complex thing, my interpretation here, this is a very loose one, should not replace Freud's. Please read the concerned books and sections as and when possible. Thank you.